And next up, we're going to take a look at whether micropayments can help take digital currencies mainstream. So I'd like to welcome Emily Spaven, our moderator from CoinDesk, and her panelists to the stage.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Spaven, I'm Managing Editor at CoinDesk, and as Jeremy says, we're here today to talk about micropayments. So it's an area that the finance and tech sectors have already explored in the past. So in the mid to late 1990s, there was kind of a lot of exploration in the area. Barclays came up with Barclaycoin, so that was their own micropayments solution. IBM had a go, and then even British Telecom produced their own version called BT Array. One thing that all of these have in common is that none of them exist anymore. Fast forward a couple of decades, and we have Bitcoin, which is a lot of companies within the Bitcoin space are now kind of re-examining this area and actually seem to be having quite a lot of success in it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. My panel that I have with me today, I've got Dan Morehead at the end here from Pantera Capital, and they've invested in ChangeTip, which is a tipping platform, uses Bitcoin to tip on social media platforms and messaging applications. We've got Wences in the middle. He's from Bitcoin wallet Xapo. And we've got Hernán Botbol next to me from Latin American social network Taringa. So Xapo and Taringa partnered up, was it this year or last year?
Oh, we launched this year.
This year?
Yeah.
Partnered up to offer kind of an ad revenue sharing platform for its content creators. So that's we'll talk about that a bit more later, but I'd like to start off speaking with Dan here. So perhaps you could tell us a bit more about ChangeTip, what it was that first kind of interested you and your fund in the company, and then maybe we could go through a quick demonstration to show people how it works.
Great. Yeah, for decades people talked about micropayments, but as Emily said, they've all failed. Clunky systems, often balkanized, can only work in one or two countries, or other problems like that. And if you see some content you want to buy, you're not willing to pay the full price. Like say, if you see an article in the Wall Street Journal, the only way to get it is to pay $348 to get the whole year subscription. If you're willing to pay 25 cents for the article, you can't do it because the Wall Street Journal won't let you buy one article for 25 cents. And it's literally impossible to send a quarter over Visa. It's below their fees. So Bitcoin enables very small payments to be made anybody on Earth, no borders, no minimums, essentially no fees, and essentially real time. So it really enables small payments, and companies like Xapo that Wences runs and ChangeTip allow their users to send very small payments to either content producers or friends or whatever, and it's just so much more efficient than the current legacy systems. Can't do small payments, and if you want to do large payments, like send a few $100s to a friend in London, got to go to the bank, do a wire transfer, costs $45, takes 3 or 4 days. And so micropayments within Bitcoin are kind of like VoIP, but money over IP. It allows you to send money pretty much instantaneously to anyone on Earth.
And so in terms of ChangeTip specifically, do you want to talk us through, maybe we could do a quick demonstration showing how it works on Twitter?
Sure. So they've set up the connections with 30 social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. So you can send any amount of money, send $500, whatever you want, to anybody that's on any one of those systems, which is getting on to most people on Earth these days. And once you've spent a couple minutes setting up an account and funding it, it takes literally like 5 or 10 seconds to send any amount of money you want to anybody on Earth. And I think, just to show how easy it is, if you have a Twitter account already set up, you can just type a tweet in and shoot it in 5 seconds. The money will show up. I sent a tweet to Emily to give her a coffee, and it's already in her account. She can go, buy a coffee. And again, if I'm sitting here on the stage, I could just walk over and give her $3 and she can go get the coffee. But if you're trying to send it to somebody in London or Jakarta, it's it's impossible to do in the current systems.
And also, if you just don't have the change on you, then it's you've always got it with you as long as you've got charge on your phone and you have it with you. I think we can probably have a look on on, so this is the Twitter feed for change tip. I think a bit lower down you'd be able to see probably where Dan had sent me
I just sent it right now.
tip. You sent it right now? Aha, there you go. There we are. So thank you very much. I'll enjoy that coffee. Right, okay. Anyone else? Okay, so there we've talked about kind of a tipping use for micropayments, and you also briefly touched upon the use of Bitcoin micropayments for paywalls. Perhaps you could, Wences and Hernán, you could talk us through the use case that you've been exploring.
Yeah, so Taringa is the largest social network created in Latin America. We have over 65 million unique users per month. And the way Taringa works, and we have been in business for 10 years, is thanks to the community that is creating content every day. There are 18 million posts on the site. We have 100 million publications and so on. And so far, all the community has done all this amazing work just because they wanted to share with the rest. They wanted to have distribution. They wanted to have recognition. However, for some time, we wanted to give back to the community. But it was really, really hard for us to achieve that. We wanted to do this for probably 4 years or so.
Sharing your revenue with content creators.
Yeah, sharing the revenue. And last year, we started to talk with Wences, and after a lot of thought and working on it, we found a way to integrate Bitcoins in a way that is very organic and helpful for the community. And now we're doing rev share to our users using Bitcoins.
Okay.
And that made us the biggest implementation of Bitcoin ever in history.
Yeah, because I think with a previous interview that you did with CoinDesk, you'd said that content creation rose on your site after you implemented the Bitcoin tipping. The revenue share, sorry. So you said it rose between 40 and 50%. Is it still going strong? Or
it's actually growing.
Yeah?
So we're very excited about that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so Wences, what do you get out of this then?
I think that Taringa is a great example. You can think of Taringa as the Reddit of Latin America. Hernán told me that he'd been trying to share the revenue with the people who create, in essence, that revenue, who create that content for years. And they couldn't do it because they need to do millions of transactions every day to lots of people, many of whom may not have a bank account. And even if they have a bank account, the transactions are small enough that it would be just either too expensive or a logistical hassle to transfer to a bank account. And when I showed him that Bitcoin was the perfect application to solve that problem, and we started to experiment, I think it's a very elegant case and something that can only be done with Bitcoin. And it wasn't, it was an idea, but now it's implemented and it's working beautifully, and it has had a significant impact, I think, beyond what Hernán and I hoped and dreamed for. So it's a great example of things that can only be done. I think that sometimes we're very focused on Bitcoin being used on things that can already be done with credit cards or other forms of payment. And I think that if right now it can be done with a credit card, I wouldn't have Bitcoin worry about it for 3 or 5 years. But there are a lot of things that credit cards can do, and that makes sense for Bitcoin to solve.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings me to the kind of main topic of the conversation. And do you think that micropayments could be the kind of application of Bitcoin and blockchain technology that brings it to the mainstream?
I think that this is all speculative, right? We're trying to guess what's going to happen, and I think by definition no one knows. I think there is a case to be made that it will be very different. What makes Bitcoin mainstream, or take Bitcoin mainstream, will be very different in emerging markets than in the developed world. In emerging markets, most people do not have credit cards, and they want to spend digitally. They want to have the advantages that come with a credit card or with a debit card or with a bank account. And just like they never got a fixed telephone line and they went straight to cell phones, most of them, they're likely to skip the credit card and the bank account and go directly to something that looks like Bitcoin on their phones. And in the developed world, because it's so easy to get a credit card or a bank account, I think that doesn't make sense. And I do think that in the developed world, micropayments may be the killer application that takes Bitcoin mainstream.
How do you feel about that, Dan?
Oh, I agree. I agree with Wences that it's going to take 5 to 10 years to compete with credit cards in the developed world. But there are markets like the emerging markets where the consumers don't have access to all the financial tools we have here that will take off quickly. And then again, monetizing content right now is incredibly inefficient on the internet. You can only get it either by a subscription where you pay a lot of money to get the whole enchilada, or some kind of annoying ad. And for example, on YouTube, the content creator that produces the video that you want to watch gets 1/10 of 1 penny for every time you have to sit there watching an ad. I'd pay a lot more than 1/10 of 1 cent to not watch the ad, and there's a lot of people that will be doing that going forward.
And is change tip the only micropayments kind of solution that Pantera Capital has invested in? Are you exploring any other kind of Bitcoin micropayment solutions from a VC point of view?
No, we're invested in Xapo, which has a fantastic micropayments platform, and then ChangeTip, and those are the two best.
And I think ChangeTip is the most well-known and probably the one with the most traction, but there are some experiments that hold a lot of promise, like Streamium it's a platform that allowed anyone to stream video for and charge per second or per minute. And the people who created Streamium now are creating a broader platform where you can do that for any service, and you can use the payment channels embedded in Bitcoin to charge by minute or by second for any service that you want. And I think it's a form of implementing micropayments that holds a lot of promise.
I'm going to have a look on Slido here, and please remember, if you've got any questions, please do send them in via Slido. So we've got a few here. How do we reconcile high mining fees with small micropayments on the blockchain? So obviously the idea is if people are using ChangeTip to send transactions, every second, then what kind of impact does this have on the blockchain, and how do we reconcile that?
I would think there'll be a cutoff where tiny transactions are aggregated by companies like ChangeTip and then flowed through the blockchain in blocks, bigger chunks.
Yeah.
We are doing more on-us transactions than there are transactions in the blockchain today. So we're doing very small micro transactions off the blockchain. We would like to do them on the blockchain, but we have to figure out how we solve the block size issue before that. And the ones that we are doing on the blockchain, you will see, us and a lot of people are doing this, where we do one transaction that has sometimes thousands of outputs, in which you're using sort of the transaction as efficiently as possible to be able to handle microtransactions in an economic, efficient way.
Okay, got a few more popped up here. Let's have a look. So I'll address this one to you, Hernán. Have superstar users that get more payments arisen in Taringa? How have payments been distributed among users? So have you seen people that have specifically, been really driving to produce more content just because of the new implementation?
Yeah, on average, our users, when we first launched it, users were creating 50% more content than before, and now we're seeing 100%, so it doubled. And then so one of the great things that we're seeing is many users, how it's shaped now is you need to qualify and have certain requirements to be part of the program. So our users are behaving the way we want them to behave to participate. So we're not only creating more content, but we're creating better quality, and we're having a healthier community.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking there's always going to be people that would try and abuse the system if they know that there's some kind of money up for grabs. There'd be people who would maybe use bots to create content for them. So you've got some kind of process in place that vets the content or the content producers? So
the users have to meet a certain quality, like a number of followers, number of posts, etc. It has to be original content. And once they publish it, we do a rev share of Taringa income on advertisement.
Okay. Got another one here. So it's another use case for micropayments, quite an interesting one. Is anyone solving using micropayments to eliminate spam emails. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I've seen a couple of different groups who are working on it. I haven't seen final implementation yet, but I know that there's a couple of different groups who are thinking on using it.
Yeah.
That's technically easy, not technically easy, but it's a lot easier to solve the technical aspects of that than the social aspects of that. Right? Where I would love to filter my email by asking people to send me 0.1 Bitcoin if I never talked to them before, 0.01 Bitcoin if I've talked to them before and not very often. But it's socially undoable. You know?
Yeah. Very good.
There are a lot of things that make sense. You know, Bitcoin in many ways is playing out like the very early internet, where there are a lot of things that make sense if you assume that there's a couple 100 million people who have wallets that have $5 worth of Bitcoin or less. There's a lot of things that we could do that make a lot of sense. But with only 12 to 13 million people owning Bitcoin, most of those things are hard to implement because not only that it's a little aggressive and douchebaggy of me to ask people to pay me to send me email, even if they were willing to do that, I'm asking them for a lot of trouble, right? It's a lot more complicated than making a credit card payment. They have to open a wallet, buy the Bitcoin, send them to me. So beyond the social problem, it's like if there were a couple 100 million people who already had $10 or less worth of Bitcoin attached to their browser or their mobile phone, this would make a lot of sense. When you only have 10 million people or 12 million people owning Bitcoin, that's a far reach, right? There's 300 million people who are playing Clash of Clans every day, so nobody's on Bitcoin yet.
So I was speaking to someone from the Barclays project from back in the 90s, from Barclaycoin it was called, and he'd said that ultimately one of the reasons why he thought it had failed was because, like you just said there, people, in order to use it, people had to download a software, so they had to download, it was called a wallet, a digital wallet, onto their machines and then load it with credit, and then they could go on to use it on websites. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So that was one of the reasons why he said that he felt it ultimately hadn't succeeded. Why do you think that Bitcoin maybe could succeed where the kind of fiat equivalents had failed?
Bitcoin has infinite patience. It's not a company, it doesn't have a board, it doesn't have a burn rate, it doesn't have capital, and it's very likely to be there from 5 years from now. It's very, very likely to be there 20 years from now. So everybody's waiting for the bit catalyzing like killer use case, but it has gotten to 12 million users without that, right? And it's growing at about 1 million new users every 2 months or so at the very least, sometimes 1 million users in a month. So you can see it getting, just without any big flashy new object, getting to a couple 100 million users, and by then it's bigger than PayPal, and by then it's a lot more useful.
And coming towards the end now, Dan, I'd like to just pose a more kind of general question for yourself. What's your stance on Bitcoin? A lot of the conversation, why the main focus of the conference really today is around blockchain technology. Where do you stand in terms of your support of Bitcoin or the currency application as opposed to just the general technology?
Well, I think it's common for any new technology to have some kind of analog we want to apply to it. It's a cryptocurrency, or it's a payment rail, or it's a micropayment system, store wealth, whatever. I think the power of Bitcoin is all those, plus things we don't even imagine yet, right? And just like all the other protocols that make up the internet, we didn't know when TCP/IP was invented in the 70s what it was going to do in 2010 or 2015. We definitely don't know what it's going to do in 2025. And that's like Bitcoin. It can do a lot of different things, and that's why I think it is so powerful. And like Wences says, it's going to take decades for some of these things to roll out, and they won't all happen at the same time. Like, I think things like micropayments are happening now, things doing kind of authentication and other cool blockchain 2.0 things are kind of happening in the next couple of years. And then really being a payment rail for the person who's currently swiping a Visa card in the United States might be 10, 20 years from now.
It has become very fashionable for finance executives of large banks and payment networks who have heard a lot about this but don't really understand technology they don't want to be the ones saying that the internet's not going to work. So they say, I'm very interested in the blockchain, but not so much in Bitcoin, which, if you understood what you were saying, it would be like saying, I really like the browser, but not so much TCP/IP. And after, It's a politically correct thing to say, but it doesn't make any sense.
Right then, well, thank you very much. We have to wrap up now, so thanks everyone, and that's the end of that.